of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Beware the Tristado. Chapter 159. The Meta-Liberation Army. Part 1. By the time 600 rolled around, several pieces of the puzzle had started falling into place. The kids are starting to get restless, We need to give them something. They've not slept a wink, and Nezu-san has gotten in touch with the principal of their junior school, so after all the parents talked it over, it's been agreed that they should have today off, and we can talk about more study programs, later. Adulting is never easy, but I feel as though I'm sucking at it right now. Marai, Hizashi, Spinner, and Tomura had wasted no time finding information on any groups who used liberation for anything from slogans to codenames.
Because believe me, I know what you mean. How you feel. I'm trying my best to check in with them, but I just don't want to get their hopes up too soon. I'll set up a group call at 700 because we should hopefully have some tracks to follow by then, shouldn't we?
And after doing what appeared to be some form of computer-based gymnastics, they'd started to collate, extrapolate, and pinpoint various people associated with something called the Liberation Army, with the police force technicians looking on in awe before stumbling over themselves to pitch in. If my husband and the others have their way, we will do. They've been glued to their screens for hours. I kind of feel like a spare part, but well, at least I can make breakfast for everyone. I'm not at that, but my onigiri, miso, and tamagoyaki should fill a hole, right? At first, as they began poking and prodding, the villain Destro kept popping up from the only book he'd ever published. To strange, almost supernatural conspiracy theories, this army was like an iceberg.
Your cooking is marvelous, Nabi-kun. Shouta, he always says so, doesn't he?
What they could see on the surface was placid callbacks to propaganda that could have been ripped straight out of All for One's Quirk Superiority playbook. However, as they started to chip away at the odd article about Destro, the few comments made on public forums about having unlimited use of quirks,
Shill says a lot of things.
They started to find patterns. Usernames were repeating, profile icons kept popping up, names of wealthy, influential people, companies, politicians, and support groups were slowly but surely coming to light, and at the very bottom of the mystery, they had two names. The first was Detnerat. This was a company whom several hero agencies had invested over the years, whose primary purpose was to craft lifestyle products for individuals who struggled with their quirks or needed additional support to live with them. In fact, Tomura's gloves, Katsuki's explosion-resisting boxing mitts, and several fabrics used by UA's costume crafting department all came from that company and its partners. This meant, of course, that they needed to tread carefully when investigating the global brand, not just because of their legal team, but because so many people depended upon its products. Therefore, for now, they would pursue the second name of interest, and that name was Destro.
But he never says anything. He doesn't mean, right?
He tried to soothe as he and his husband's first unofficially official ward and himself stood in the unusually quiet Noraneko cafe, the younger man fussing with the apron he usually wore when cooking as they leaned on either side of the service bar. The other nodded whilst blinking away the tears that were trying to gather on his lashes. God, he wanted to reach out for him, to offer him comfort. But Nabi, as sweet as he was, as well as they'd been getting on these past few years, still struggled with physical touch from others. In fact, only Tomura, Shouta, his mother, and siblings were ever truly allowed to be tactile with him.
Would it be okay if I...
The other grunted before walking swiftly from where he'd been so rigidly stood, so desperately trying to keep himself together as the tech geniuses slumbered away upstairs, a mixture of burnout and stress no match for the coffee they'd been chugging. Come here, he sighed, their arms opening to each other. Letting out a gentle sigh, Toshinori enveloped the young man who'd once been wary of him. He'd been born to best him, but now...
I hate not being able to do more,
Gently smoothing his sun-kissed hands over the other's back, the number one simply bowed his head and held him close. God, he knew the feeling all too well. Feeling Mashiro's tail coil around him shouldn't have been as comforting as it was, but he couldn't have been gladder to have the slightly younger but certainly more muscular boy here with them all right now.
Jisan sends his best, guys. The Tokyo and Musutafu martial arts community have offered everything they can to Commander Tsukurame too,
the blonde told them as he reluctantly pulled away, his features determined but tinged by sadness as all of them sat or stood in the Sanctuary Heights common room. In some ways, it felt nostalgic to be back at the dormitory that had been his home for those few years before his parents officially adopted him, but right now, he longed to be home. He wanted to walk through their apartment door, his school bag in hand, and crash onto his dad's favorite couch, or, after getting changed into his casual clothes, running back downstairs to help Papa on the Noroneko. Neitoku? Blinking out of his thoughts, the copy quirk user found Ochako on his left and Itoshi on his right, the pair of them hunkering into his sides as they led him to one of the freshly aired couches.
Sorry,
he murmured with a small shrug.
I kinda spaced out for a second.
He tried to smile, his body leaning into the iris-haired boy's side, whilst his mother, Rei, Inko, and Mitsuki bustled around the kitchen behind them, with Fuyumi and Ryuko, with Katsuki and Tsuyu dishing up steaming bowls of rice, miso soup, and plating tamagoyaki. Don't be sorry, okay? All of this is a lot, the brunette hushed kindly, a hand gently combing through his lack of sleep-tousled hair, her eyes momentarily moving from him to the other sleep-deprived teens, sprawled in various states of disarray amidst the sofas they'd not crowded around since the Himurazen himself had moved out of this purpose-built dorm. A dorm that could one day be used by UA students sometime soon. A dorm that would become one of many once Nezuji got the planning permission cleared by Musutafu's city council. From the way Hitoshi was looking at him, he'd let his mind wander off again, hadn't he?
Toshiji said he's gonna call us all at 7.
The taller, slightly broader teen who was holding him murmured.
We can set Denki on him, and the others again, if you want to head to his agency after we've eaten.
Grinning a little, his crystalline eyes sweeping the room to find the electricity quirk user, all but passed out across the couch he'd slumped on earlier, and curled around Mashiro's tail, whilst the martial artist quietly spoke with Mezzo, Rikido, and Izuku. Nato hummed whilst Shoto caught up from that group to assist his mother in setting the table.
That's an idea,
he admitted softly while snuggling against the other, his eyes blinking a few times as he tried to compose himself.
But I think we should see how the call goes,
he breathed, his voice a little raspy.
Maybe Dad will actually have some good news this time.
He tried as the taller boy hugged him tight. If there was an upside to any of this madness, it was that his papa, their shared cat dad, and Shoni had been right. Their community, their family was strong. The bonds they'd formed were something that would transcend anything. Even the loss of him. Oh God. He couldn't lose another family. He couldn't bear to be alone again. Hey, boys, let's all have something to eat, okay? You need to keep your strength up and... Oh, Nato, honey, come here. Sniffling a little, he didn't resist as Shinso Kimiko took up the seat Ochako had occupied and enveloped him as the dam he'd been trying to keep up finally gave way. And somewhere in his mind, as he cried, he was sure he heard Papa's voice soothing him, telling him that it was okay to cry, that he needed to let out his upset, his frustration and pain, but he wanted...
I need him,
he breathed desperately.
I need him back.
Listening to what Toshiji had been difficult, the promising news they'd been hoping for was sadly still out of reach.
Now, we don't know for certain why Rampa went there or whether this was connected to Shota's abduction, but Sugarame-san, Mirai, and our top investigators believe that it is... However, at the moment, Rappa is in some kind of medically induced coma. He's fine for the most part. The doctors just aren't sure how to reverse the effects, so right now, we can't learn anything further from him.
Watching Tamaki and Ejiro bonk at the news broadcast through the loudspeaker of Nato's phone, Midoriya Izuku continued to quietly add to his notes. Every piece of information he felt was useful. They had all refused to just sit idly by on the sideline whilst their cat dad was still out there, and as someone who'd once consigned himself to a harsh, lonely, and isolated life filled with dejection and no hope of having friends, let alone being a hero before the Noroneko Cafe opened, he was going to do everything he could to help find and return Shoni.
We've called in for a specialist friend of mine to see what she can do, but in the meantime, we have several other leads we're following, alright?
Leads that the pros seem reluctant to share with them. Even Dabini, Domoni, and Spinnerny have been oddly cryptic when they tried to sneak information from them. Not that they were intentionally hiding things from them, of that he was sure, no. No, they were attempting to shield them from further hurt and harm. He knew that. They all knew that, but...
Jisung, me, Kat-chan, and Thomas-senpai can we go to the hospital? We can bring food to Toshiro-ji, you know?
Blinking when the ebony-haired boy spoke, Izuku felt his brows lift in understanding. That'd mean that the three of them would be escorted out of UA and free to move. Free to gather further information, too.
Of course you got my boys. I'm sure Fatcom would be grateful for the company. He's not left for up aside since we found him. I'll ask Ruby to pick you up when she comes to collect Fuyumi for college, alright?
Offering the rookie brawler and their leader a slight nod, Izuku then got up and made a subtle gesture for Ochako, Tsuyu, and Shoto to follow him. This was an opportunity they couldn't afford to waste, and with Rikido, Mezzo, Mashiro, and Denki all on hand to give Hitoshi and Nato the emotional support they needed, the rest of them were going to get to work doing everything they could, because regardless of the faith they had in their pro-hero brothers, sisters, aunties, and uncles, Shoni wouldn't stop looking for them if their situation had been reversed, and so, his eyes meeting his friends, they jogged upstairs to put together a plan for the others to put their time outside of UA to good use. By 9, the mystery of Ridestro was still something they couldn't quite put their fingers on. Detneret, for all intents and purposes, was a legitimate business, dutifully serving the public, and after putting their tech-based feelers out, some of the posts they'd been monitoring had disappeared. Anonymous online personas suddenly closed their accounts. Certain web chats had vanished or had become private and encrypted. He breathed as his husband filled up his mug once more with coffee.
They're like cockroaches skittering when the lights turned on.
He muttered darkly, his fingers flying over keys as he attempted to chase IP addresses with their best friend and Hisashi, the three of them mumbling angrily between themselves in the quiet sanctity of the Noroneko. The same Noroneko that should be filled with people happily enjoying breakfast. The same cafe where the cats should be delighting in the attentions of school children before they embarked on another day of learning. Their wonderful sanctuary where the sounds of laughter, chatting, and video games effortlessly mixed with smooth jazz, the purr of the coffee machine, and the lyrical chimes of the cathedral bell, which still dutifully hung over the door, which was now locked. Barring customers who were similarly stunned by Show's absence, mortified that the pillar of their community had gone, angry in the face of someone daring to harm the man who'd invested so much in making their lives better.
"You're doing great,"
Dabi murmured gently, a kiss pressing against his temple.
"I'm going to call the kids, okay? Just let me know if you guys need anything."
Humming a quicksilver hand snapping out to grab his lover's and squeeze it, he allowed his eyes to stray from the illuminated screen he'd been glued to so he could look at the man he loved. The man he probably would have never met if... The man he wouldn't have allowed himself to fall for if...
We are going to find him,
he promised, his lips cracking around the determined smile he gave.
And then I'm going to convince him to let me put a tracking chip in his neck or something.
Tomra.
Oh, yes, or we could sew something into his hair.
Spinner.
Or we can, equip him with bracelets or anklets that can't be removed.
Hisashi, all of you, no.
The love of his life huffed, his bloodshot eyes rolling in mock exasperation.
You guys just keep searching, and I'll start cooking up the rest of those eggs.
before they go bad for lunch, so I hope everyone's okay with the shows, not shows version of omurice I'm going to make, okay? Holding Shota's wedding rings in his hands, Toshinori felt his grief melt under the heat of his anger. How dare they? How dare someone use their love like this? The special express delivery had already been tracked. The CCTV footage within the post office showed a teenaged boy making the transaction. They'd been floored. None of this made sense. How could this be happening? You received an email too. Gently cupping the rings, the supposed number one walked in a state of trance-like understanding towards a sleep-deprived Naomasa, the young detective's expression grim whilst Sansa moved out of the way to allow him access to a computer that Kenji-san was scowling at.
A ransom, then,
He murmured, his scowl thunderous.
We need to forward this to my nephew, Spinner, and President Mike.
Toshinori, come on now.
No!
He grunted, his eyes narrowing at Torino.
Toshinori, come on now.
No!
He grunted, his eyes narrowing at Torino Sorahigo as his mentor sat up, his currently maskless face bitter and shrewd.
I trust in their skills, in their desire to find Shouta,
He breathed.
and that's not to say that I'm not grateful or appreciative of the police force. However, if these bastards who have my husband aren't playing by the rules, well, to a certain extent, neither are we.
He spat, his teeth gritting.
Plus, Tom Raccoon has the kind of genius that we can overlook. That Anasashi and Spinner can access things that they've proven these hard-working technicians can't.
He grunted, his eyes then slanting to his trembling hand that held the rings. The symbols of a love he shared with the man who seemed to be nothing more than a pawn to the unfeeling, greedy villains who saw him as a cash cow. God! He could barely remember a time when he'd been so incensed.
So, now, Master-kun, please forward the entire message and its source code onto them for me.
He breathed before striding towards the office door.
And you?
His former mentor bit out, his body scrambling from the sofa, his mug of coffee forgotten.
Where do you think you're going, Gaki?
Slipping the circular piece of metal into the secret pocket at his lower back, the costumed number one allowed a particularly dark-lit smile to pass his features as he looked over his shoulder.
I'm going back to the Jakku Prefecture,
He stated, his eyes glinting with the power of All for One.
Samontos and Power Lorna are still tunneling around the Tunal estate, and I figure I can help knock down a wall or two.
He all but growled, his tone darkening.
If there's a trail to follow there, I intend to find, follow, and open it.
He added pointedly, his fists clenching.
All bets are off, and I don't care how many people are supposedly a part of them.
He stated, his eyes narrowing.
The Metal Liberation Army has seen its last sunrise.